Do you want to take dreamy, slow shutter speed photos but you don't know how? Well, good news, because I've been shooting like that for years, and I've got you covered. I'm not talking about those 30-second long exposures that make a river look like a silky mush. No, I'm talking about the sweet spot of slow shutter speed photography. The kind of shutter speeds that make your photos look like a memory. So let's not waste any more time, let's get into it. And I'm going to give you that secret sauce about the sweet spot of slow shutter speeds, but first we really need to talk about your setup. To shoot slow shutter speeds, you really need to be able to get slow shutter speeds, which can be fine if it's, low light, but if it's a bright, sunny day, not so much. So you'll want an ND filter or a variable ND filter. They're basically like sunglasses for your lens. It stops some of that light getting in, so you'll be able to get those shutter speeds down lower than my self-worth. So you've got your ND filter. Next, you've just got to sort your aperture and your ISO. If you're shooting digitally, set your ISO as low as you can. If you're shooting on film, usually your ISO is pretty low anyway, but you could always get a lower ISO film stock like Portra 160. And then if you still can't get your shutter speed quite as low as you want, then you're going to have to increase your aperture. So bringing it up to like f16, f22, however far your lens can go. So technically, if you're only shooting in low light, then you don't need an ND filter. You can probably get your shutter speeds as low as you need to. But if you're shooting in a bright sunny day, you're going to need that ND filter. For nearly all of the ways that I'm talking about shooting, you probably won't need a tripod. If you're shooting anything above a 20th of a second, you can probably shoot it handheld. But if you're going lower than that, you'll need a tripod. You can get some for, relatively good prices. It's worth paying a bit more for a good tripod because you get what you pay for. Anyway, with all that gear talk out of the way, let's get to the nitty-gritty. But first, if you're new to film photography and you're trying to figure out your way through this crazy world, then I've got the perfect course for you. I've basically put together the film photography course that I wish I had when I first started shooting. It'll take you from a complete beginner to shooting bangers on the regular. And the best thing is, if you don't think it's quite right for you, then you can request a free refund within 14 days. And the first 100 people can get a free 50% off with the code FILMY50 at checkout. So go ahead and take a look. Now let's get back to it. And I want to talk about the slow shutter speed sweet spot. And I'll try not to make it too complicated. But this is the kind of law of slow shutter speed shooting. The effect of the movement in your image is relative to the distance your subject is away from your frame and the speed that your subject is moving. If that sounds really confusing right now, it's going to make much more sense in a second. Let's say that you were shooting at 1 second, a shutter speed of 1 second, and you're using a 35mm lens, which is pretty standard. And someone runs past the frame while you're taking a picture. When you take that picture, you'll see quite a bit of movement through that frame. But if the subject was running the same speed, but they were 50 meters away from the frame, and you're still shooting at a 35mm focal length, and it's still 1 second, still a 1 second shutter speed, you might not see any movement, or the movement will be very minimal. Now think if the same subject was 50 meters away, but you were using a 200mm lens, which is obviously very zoomed in, and the person was running at the same speed, and you were using a 1 second shutter speed, then they would be blurry again. You would see the movement again. And it's purely because of how the frame is. It's not to do with the distance from the photographer and the subject. It's to do with the distance in comparison to the frame. If that doesn't quite click now from my explanation, then it will when you're out shooting. You will understand it. But then understanding this helps us to find that slow shutter speed sweet spot, because I think that it's better to have some movement in an image rather than having everything be completely blurry. And this means usually that your shutter speeds don't have to be that slow. They can be between, let's say, half a second and a 60th of a second, rather than going down into 5 seconds or 30 seconds, that super long exposure territory. So here we are at the really good bit, where I'm going to tell you about some of the different ways you can use slow shutter speeds to get different effects and start to take really dreamy pictures and make some really creative shit. By the way, we're having a heat wave in the UK, so I'm sorry if I look real sweaty right now. My favorite part about slow shutter speed photography is that when you start using it and when you start to get used to it, you start to be able to see where you could use it everywhere. Cars, birds, people at a rave, whatever it is, you can use slow shutter speeds to get really cool shots. But to really get your head in the game and get understanding how to use slow shutter speeds, I'm going to tell you about how I use them. And the first one is a great one to get started off with. And it's simply having something moving quickly through your frame. So that could be that you're stood on the side of a road and there's already a good composition, but there are cars driving past and you think, this could be a bit better if there's a bit of movement from these cars. This could be someone running through the frame. It could be a cyclist cycling through the frame. But the key is you stay still. You take a still image at, like, let's say 1/15th to 1/60th of a second. The whole rest of the frame is nice and still, but the person moving through it is blurry and you can see the movement. And this is exactly what I did here. I set my tripod up, I put it to, I think it was about 1/10 of a second, and took the picture as the car went over the hill. I had to go quite low because the car was actually going pretty slow over the brow of the hill. And it turned out pretty much perfectly. In that case, if the car was moving much faster, maybe I would have gone up to, let's say, a 30th of a second. You still would have seen some movement. It still would have been the kind of image that I wanted to take. And it just adds so much to the image. It's real simple, but really effective. But that's not the only way to use slow shutter speeds. No. This one is a little bit harder, but once you get used to it, and if you can get it right, you can get some really cool shots. The next one is what I call a pan-in shot. So something's moving through the frame again, but this time, instead of staying still, you move the camera with the subject. And for this, you end up getting a blurred background and the subject stays sharp. And that is really hard to do. It's all about timing and getting the shutter speeds correct. If it was something that was moving moderately slowly, let's say it was someone on a bike or something like that, then you might go to like a 20th, a 30th of a second. If it was like a race car flying past you, then you could go to like 125 or something like that, because that vehicle's moving really quickly, so you're gonna have to pan way quicker. That's definitely much harder to get used to and get right, but once you can sort of get to grips with it and get to grips with the kind of shutter speeds you need, then you're gonna start taking some really cool shots. And not many people use this sort of style. And my final tip about using slow shutter speeds is to be really creative with it. There's so many different ways that you can incorporate it into how you shoot, and it makes for some really unusual shots. And again, just the kind of shots that people don't tend to take. For instance, a while back, we were in a cable car, and because we were moving so close to the trees, I was able to take a picture of my girlfriend's like legs and some of her shopping, but then also the trees underneath it were moving really quickly, so you get all that movement from them. It could be birds flying past you, it could be so many different kinds of things, and that's what's really exciting about it. It just opens up this completely different avenue and opens up a way for you to take pictures that a lot of people might not even completely understand. They might look at them and go, how is that taken? For me, the reason that I started shooting like this is because I wanted to add more feeling to my images. I wanted to make things feel like a memory, basically. And adding the movement into the way you shoot can really achieve that. So go ahead, start playing around with slow shutter speeds. You never know what kind of things you might take. And don't just take my word for it. You might want to go a bit slower. you might want to go a little bit faster. I'm saying this is a sweet spot for me. It might not be the ideal spot for you. If you enjoyed this one and you want to take dreamy photos, then there are loads of other ways of doing it. And that's why I've got this video that you can watch next. And it's perfect. There's compositional elements to it and all sorts, editing, whatever. Take a look at it and yeah, take some dreamy photos. Enjoy yourself. Have fun.